Alright, let me try to do this better. I'm sure it was probably a little confusing. And let me try to get this straight. Because there's a lot to it. Now, when I said I'm ADHD, it's not HD, it's just ADD. Okay, so I can kind of jump from place to place. But I can't sleep. It's super late and I've got a lot on my mind. Now, first off, yes, I was Steve Jobs' sweetheart. Yes, we had made plans to stay together forever. Yes, I was of age. The age of consent was 17. But I had dropped out of school for a year because my abusive, crazy ass mother, who was, remember, hiding the gold of an inside bank job that I can't guarantee was tied to directly Bonnie and Clyde or just their other two guys. Okay, because two guys got busted for the job. But the truth is, my grandfather and the bank owner went home with the money. Now, what does this have to do with Steve Jobs? Well, I was Steve Jobs' sweetheart before he made it. Now, lots of different things take place. I met Steve at 7-Eleven. So, I don't know who's watching this. I know I've sent some emails out with it. But my mother, when Steve came over and almost tore the door off our house, ready to throw my mom in jail, as my mom stood there in her Neiman Marcus suit. Steve was in a suit too. He was in a brown suit. But I had told him to shave, and he didn't shave. And I knew Steve would be better looking if he had shaved. It just looked better on him or his business. He needed to clean up. But he decided to show up at my mom's house, so I still had that year of high school I was about to be done with, and another year because I had dropped out. Okay? I ended up graduating with my class. But as Steve is, yelling his brains out at my mother in the most aggressive manner I'd ever seen in my life, the only person standing up for me, okay? The only person other than these two old ladies, this one that died and this rich old lady who died too. But they lied to me about her dying. They just took me away from her because things started getting exposed more. Because I would never shut up about my grandfather and the bank owner robbing the bank from the inside. Okay? So, my mother had kept me locked up in the house with no phone, no way to get out, no windows you could get out of. I'm serious. And the days that were crazy, or I would fight them, they would drug me and just, you know, I'd wake up God only knows when. There was no way out. I had to do what they said or they beat the living fool out of me. Now, this started when I was really young. I mean, imagine I was a little girl and I was ordered. I could not cross my foot outside the door. If I did, they would just literally beat the tar out of me. Because usually I would say something that they didn't like. What happened was, it got worse when I was 5 because I found a dead body across the street. Okay? And the police wanted to talk to the person that found the dead body. Well, it was me. A little 5 or 7-year-old. Okay? I think it was 5. I can remember the whole thing in my mind. It was like walking up on Marilyn Monroe, except she was more like Ted Bundy's wife, okay? So, I would sit with Steve for hours and tell him these long stories while he'd be on the phone with, I guess, Scully, having a fight. Steve wanted to play that he was just an employee at one point. And then finally I was like, you know what? He was in a radical phone call. I was just sitting there. And I looked at him and I'm like, you know what? You're so full of shit. No employee yells at their employer like that. There's no way in hell. But all this is tied into my book. Because I'm writing about everything Steve Jobs and I did. Everything I did with Matthew McConaughey. Everything I did with Daryl Abbott. I'm writing about my mother, what she did to Steve, and what my grandfather robbing the bank. All the stories I would tell him about my family and their prestigious ways of a bank my grandfather robbed that was friends or in cahoots with Bonnie and Clyde. Now this is all documented, okay? It's in Google. It was in the Star Telegram. This is a real bank robbery that my grandfather did, and they pulled it off. It may be the only story on the planet, I don't know, of it being pulled off. And all these years later, I'm here to tell what happened. Things about Steve Jobs people do not know. How the turtleneck really happened. The tennis shoes. The colored computers. Apple. Lisa. This was all before Lorraine. Things about Chris Ann. And what my mother did. Now, I believe my mother has ties to West Point. Trying to put this on hold for a second. Can't get it yet. Maybe if I turn it upside down. That's probably what's going to work it. Hold on. Now, I'm back. I have lots of stories about Steve. I've got explosive stories. You see, I was adopted. I was born November 1st. Wasn't that interesting? Tim Cook's born November 1st. Laureen Powell Jobs was born November 1st. But the thing is, I knew Steve before he knew y'all. So that says a lot right there. So I'm adopted. He's adopted. My mom is the daughter of the bank robber who worked inside the bank, whose boss was the richest man in town. Where do you think the richest man in the cemetery story comes from? That Steve quotes. It comes from my grandfather. How do you think I told Steve to dress? Okay, now, that's the other stories. But I'm laying here, all this shit's on my mind. Steve told me to network. Well, you know, what did I tell you? He got sick and died before the children were grown. Because, you know, our media, they will splash somebody all over the world. Now, I was hiding partly as I was finding out, or I had just become, I've been hiding Before that, I was in searches with my birth father. Because Steve was like, isn't that cool? One day you'll get to talk to him on the internet. Okay? Because he was like, oh my God, you have got to be their kid. And I was like, I know. So we bonded because we were adopted. We met at 7-Eleven having a stare down. So, while he was yelling and fighting and fussing with y'all, or whomever, see, you want to be so far up in the elite world because you have so much money because of what Steve helped you get that you're almost elusive to get a hold of. So, you know what? Steve told me, cuss him out if you have to. And I'm like, well, I don't want to cuss him out. And he's like, fucking cuss him out. It's like, you know what? So, we'll just go with, the only thing I really want to say is, that pisses me off. It pisses me off. Is the fact that I was respecting, you know, when they say the road to hell is paved with good intentions. Okay, well, kiss my butt. Alright, so I was respecting Steve's marriage with Lorene. Okay? Now, I'm not mad about it because it was my fault for running off and getting married first. Okay? But it was because she was lying to me about him calling. I was like, Steve called. No. I'm talking the day he left. They beat the crap out of me. She took the phone off the wall. She threw his phone number away. See, I didn't know how big he was already. Okay? She had been keeping me locked up in the fucking house in the first place. She had been threatened by the police. Well, by the doctor with the police. Okay? If she didn't change her ways, he was going to turn her in. And Steve threatened to turn her in. I thought he was going to tear the doors off that house. Oh my God. Oh my God. I've never had anybody stand up for me. But then he wasn't expecting the bitch he got a hold of. She scared the shit out of him. I just stood there with my jaw open, staring at both of them. And as she told me to tell him goodbye, after they had this knockdown, drag-out fight over adopting me, sending me to the best schools in the world, always making sure I had art supplies and everything that I needed, fancy dresses, everything. And she shouldn't treat an adopted child like that. Because, see, they tried to give me back when I was 2. Just like Steve talks about. It's the same thing. We were bonded beyond belief. I think it is. I think it's this. I think the world couldn't handle Steve and I alive in public together. I think people would have tripped their brains. Tripped out. So, they've had this big ass fight. They're both threatening to destroy each other. I'm just standing there, and my mom's swearing up and down that that Steve's messing with somebody that's 10 years younger than him. And that it was, what is the bullshit she used? And I think his jaw just dropped open because we hadn't been doing that shit. We were goo goo gaga in love, but we were working on the computer because I told him, once we kiss, this will ruin everything until it's right. And he was like, you are so smart. You are just so smart. He would call me a genius all the time, but my mom is accusing him of, like, I guess this bullshit of maybe Epstein that's going on, okay? But that had nothing to fucking do with nothing. I gotta make myself real clear. Steve and I weren't screwing. He wanted to kiss me. But that was right before he was wanting to fly back. That he was going back to California. Okay? Now, I had made a promise. Oops, I'm losing control of my tablet. To myself, I wasn't going to kiss anybody for a while. Because I wanted to feel butterflies in my heart. Because my first boyfriend had died in this tragic crash. I was allowed to go to church, but I was on strict orders to keep my mouth shut and to do nothing but stand there and look pretty. Okay? Because everybody was like, you're so pretty. I was standing there ready to scream my brains out. Now, Steve and I met at 7-Eleven. Because my mother was ordered to let me out of the house. Okay? Now, some of you, I don't know which one of you of corporate have found this. I don't know if you're Bill Gates. I don't know if you're Larry Ellison. I don't know if you're Jeff Bezos. I don't know if you're Tim Cook. I don't know if you're these guys at CEO of Apple. I don't know if you're Lorraine. But back to Lorraine. The only thing that pisses me off is what my parents did to Steve. But when I hear or I see on Google, so nobody's willing to speak up. And that's the thing. They hated that I had a big mouth. Okay? So, when I see there's comments from Laureen Powell Jobs in Google as she's standing there with a picture of herself, because that's what we get as peasants, you know. Well, I'm not on the elite, but I hung out with the elite before he became the elite, and I was from the elite with names that are so big people still write gangster songs and raps and movies about them, is Bonnie and Clyde. Y'all just didn't know Bonnie and Clyde's bank grandpa was my grandpa. Why do you think Steve was tied to me? Don't you think he's where the money is? Alright, so that probably has nothing to do with it. Let me tell you this. When I told Steve about the color blue, which y'all hear all the time, you used to when he was alive, about the color blue. It's a specific color. We would go outside, I'd show him right before I'd be forced to have to go home to this crazy lady and set the table for dinner. Now, I'm the reason there's pink and blue telephones. I'm the reason there's pink and blue and green and yellow and orange computers, you know. You think Steve came up with that shit by himself? And I know for a fact, no way in hell did it come all out of that art design room. No, it did not. I'm the artist that Steve was hanging out with every day. Now, you know Steve, he was working his ass off. Why would we be kissing? But while I was working, I was telling him these stories because we had bonded. We had bonded over being adopted. Okay? And we were goo-goo looking at each other. Now, I had boundaries and I had maturities that Steve said girls that he had met never had. Okay? Like, I walked in 7-Eleven backwards to keep from Steve staring at my butt. It's a long, funny story as we pumped gas. But he said every girl in California wants you to look at their ass. And I was like, well, I knew. You might have Because I was considered, or what I was told, I was smoking hot. But, okay. Now, who cares? But this was back then. But when I hear Laurene Powell Jobs say it has to be the right color blue. Now, she's got to understand, this is being projected through the internet to me under Google with a picture of you. Okay? The right color blue came from me. That's not yours. That's mine. Now, you may have billions of dollars, and Steve was going to buy me whatever I needed or wanted. Now, there's a moral point to this story. I may have respected your marriage, but I ended up busted broke when a bunch of my ideas went with Steve to Apple. So, I write about all this in my book. I write about stories about Lisa, Chris Ann, Steve, what my parents did to me before I met Steve to shut me up over this bank robbery. Because, like I said, my mom couldn't. My grandpa hid the money. Because, remember, he had an epiphany. You know, it's on principle and value. The product is on principle and value. Damn it. But you didn't come up with the color blue. I don't care what any one of you say on the elite level discussing and walking around. And if you're in some wine or cocktail party and somebody says, well, it has to be the right color blue. Really? That was mine and Steve's. That right color blue hardly even exists anymore because all the internet waves through the planetary system. You can't even see that color blue in the horizon unless I've been trapped in this city, little countryside for so long without a vacation, without nothing, just surviving. People beating me and me hiding and looking for Steve and running all over. Ended up in Washington, D.C. in the White House in the Senate dining room with the King of Rwanda sitting at his feet on my birthday, November 1st. November 1st. Yeah, and the color blue. Okay. It's real interesting that y'all have November 1st birthdays. Just like me. I think if Steve and I had stayed together or not, we probably would have just gone off on this big acid trip. But I just have got to get some of this off my shoulders, off my mind. I've been trying to reach y'all. You know, we had decided for me to network through the sides of magazines. But, you know, it all grew and grew. And you got to remember, I was poor and running around. I didn't have a TV. I didn't have much media. I didn't have a phone until 11 years after the fact. Okay? But Steve Jobs and I were best friends. Laurene, please understand. As an artist, you're a writer. You've got your ideas and your things are about ISIS. Is it ISIS? ICE? It's not ISIS, but ICE. And people from coming into America undocumented. My life's been about artists, painting. I have a painting with Peter Max that has that fine line of blue the closest blue I could get to the closest blue on the color of the sky at dusk. Now, sure, I framed Alexandria Nikita's work. She has a little tiny, I call them piano art, picture I gave her. But this all came about from a painting of mine that I brought to Steve one day. Now remember, I was of age, because I was held back in school a year. Age of consent. So this isn't some Epstein bullshit, okay? Let's just completely exit that my mom was trying to possibly tie this shit into, okay? I even have a birthday card from Bill Clinton. Now, this shit's crazy. I grew up near Daryl Abbott, so I knew him. And I'd hang out with him every day, and then I'd drive over and hang out with Steve. And both Steve and Daryl knew my mom. And Daryl got shot in the head on stage. Remember, it's Pantera. And Steve died of cancer. Now, I met Matthew McConaughey in Austin. Did I smoke pot with him all night? You definitely did. So, now, please respect the color blue phrase. I mean, y'all have all the money. Those little TVs that Lisa said look like ovens, easy bake ovens. Well, it's my fault. We discussed it sitting there at the table. Steve wanted to know what I wanted. I told him. He said, "What color do you want?" He goes, What do you want? What color?" And I was like, "Steve, those things are so gray and ugly." First, he asked me, "Would your mom let you have one of these computers in your room?" And you gotta remember, I came from these well-off, snotty, very snobby, high-to-do, affluent Bonnie and Clyde robbers, okay? I said, "Steve, my mom's not gonna let me have one of those in the house." I used to tease him about his little Apple thing. I said, "One of them little Apple TVs." He's like, "What did you say?" And I said, "Yeah, a little red or green or blue. You get a little apple-shaped TV." And he goes, "You don't know what you just did." And I was like, "What do you mean?" He goes, "I never even thought about making them in color. What color do you want?" Because he thought my favorite color was blue because of a painting. But I said pink. That was a color my mother would never let me have. For some reason, I guess, tied to Jane Mansfield. But it had to be a specific color blue. So you may have the yacht and the boats and all the money and all the prestige and all the good food, but I have these really badass memories with Steve. And still, the color blue was from me, from the little girl that had been beaten and locked up to shut the hell up about Bonnie and Clyde, my papa running the bank, and my mother having the money, and Steve Jobs threatening to put her in jail. As she drugged me, beat me. My dad came home and beat the crap out of me, sat on me, as she chopped celery. And she threatened him. She took his number and put it down the disposal. Then she unplugged the phone. She locked it up in her room and the trunk. I don't know how many days it was before I was allowed back to school. Please respect the color blue. Lorraine, thank you for taking care of my friends. I did everything to respect your marriage and your children. I'll say more sometime soon about my feelings. I'm sorry y'all's friend died. He was my friend too. He was my best friend. He was my sweetheart. And nobody's talking. There's this big gap. Have you ever noticed? Nobody's saying nothing. That's because nothing? Nobody? Well, I'm still alive. Y'all are gonna have to come kill me to shut me up. I'm talking. And you better not try to come kill me and shut me up. You could go look at one of my other videos about a cop who is on my videos dressed like KKK. I had some really cool videos, but I took them down. They'd blow your mind. They would trip your mind. But I still was struggling with issues. The back streets of YouTube and how cruel it is. Whoever you are listening to me, God bless you. I hope you have everything you need. I hope your family's well and everybody's safe. I don't care how much money all of you have. I almost said motherfuckers. That's what. I don't have to cuss. Because I saw my supposed rock star dad cussing at the public. Oh my. And I also saw this crazy woman cussing. I'll get into her another time. She has to do with the funeral people that I talk about. That Steve was scared of. Alright. I hope you all have what you need, what you want, what you dream of, what you hope for, what purpose Steve brought the internet to you for you to achieve in your life. Whether you're designing, whether you're Johnny Eyes and you're designing, you know, I miss Steve.